Hello and welcome back to another Mama Thrive episode, and in this video we're answering a question that came up in relation to one of our other videos where we talked about holding space, and we'll link to the video underneath so you can see the original holding space and all the concept and theory around that. But the question that came out of that is, so after you've held space for your child to express what they need to express and allow their emotion to move through them, essentially, what do you do then? What happens when there needs to be more, there needs to be a solution, or there needs to be further discussion, or there needs to be other action? In the video on holding space, we talk about how quite often that's all that's needed, is once they've expressed and they've held space, that the whole energy of the situation unravels and feels resolved to the child and to you. Like the whole situation is complete. But there are times when it isn't complete, and where do you go next? And so that's what we're going to talk about today.
And we're going to talk about two different approaches. And the first one, which often naturally happens between me and my son, because he's quite an energetic and physical person, is play. Play as kind of healing and therapy that just kind of naturally unfolds.
So often the younger the child, the more inclined they are naturally to move to play, to seek out solutions, to practice different ideas, to role play experiences in life. And that's kind of all part of the play therapy side of things. And my son still adores play. He's my youngest. I remember even when my daughter was little, I was probably a little more formal in it back in those days, but we used finger puppets, and we had a lot of games and role playing with dolls or with finger puppets. Sometimes with my son in particular, we do much bigger, more physical play in the way that we role play solutions. We might add humour and take it over the top. We might explore different realities in different ways. Like we've played a game once where we had different pretend portals that we would go through, and different scenarios would act out depending on which portal we jumped through, so that it would be a whole game where we would actually be role playing and exploring possible courses of action on ways that might play out, and giving them an experience of processing it and exploring it out of the moment in a way that they could really relate to and that felt fun.
Yeah, and it's not, this is not necessarily about really trying to create that situation or think about how you might make it unfold, but it's more just like you give space to hold space, just like you hold the container just to let them express themselves. If something needs to happen further, it's about kind of holding that space for exploration to happen and being an active participant in that. So for example, with my son, holding space around different social dynamics that might have happened for him often doesn't feel like enough, because he's still got energy. He might still have some anger or some resentment or some feelings of disempowerment or whatever that are moving through him. And sometimes if I'm just there receptive and kind of holding that space, holding that energy, he'll initiate play, and I'll go with it with him and kind of let him take the lead with this knowing that this is kind of a sacred playtime. And for him it's often kind of power play where he wants to feel in control and kind of try out different roles and have me kind of play maybe the one who he has control over, for example, and he might do it in some funny ways. Like he did this funny thing recently where he just wanted to wedgie me and he just kept doing it, and it felt really, really healing for him, and it became a game that he could anchor to help him process intense feelings. And so for example, if we have little rituals like that, if I'm in social situations with him and he's starting to feel out of control, he can come to me and initiate the game with me rather than lose it at someone else who might be annoying him. So the games are kind of anchors to come back to a safe way to work out what's going on for him.
So a really important piece that Kaya mentioned there is that you're not directing the play or the solution. You're following the lead of your child, and they will naturally play out the dynamic, whether they want to feel empowered and in control, whether they want to... often that's a piece of it for my child, my youngest too. He wants to come back into a place of empowerment and feeling strong again before he's willing to explore the other pieces, before he's willing to look at the other person's part or any of that, or how it might look differently. There's often a piece of reconnecting to their own personal power, and they want to explore that with you.
Another area where it's often applicable, and this happens more so with my daughter who's a bit older and less physically active than my son, is it's safe places to bring up topics that they might feel a bit funny about or ashamed of, or like, oh, I don't even want to go there. They'll bring it up in games and in like role play games or something where they'll exaggerate something about themselves that they might not feel that comfortable with, and there's healing in that.
So not directing the play is a really important piece, and instead following the play and just going with the flow of it wherever you can. So the other piece that you can sometimes do if you're not going to go the play route is sometimes a child, and often an older child I would say with this one, really does want to talk and to have guidance and feedback on how they want to proceed, or how they want to tackle that again if it comes up, or how they want to move forwards from this space. And in this situation, if you've held space first and they've started to allow things to move and to process, the general outcome of holding space, in my experience, is it creates a very strong connected space. And so often it does flow into a really safe space for a really open and authentic conversation to occur. Okay, so before we talk about the main concept that we're going to dive into as the solution, I want to say that there's a lot of ways that you can go about having this conversation with your children and supporting them to find solutions. And there's definitely no one way. The way that we're going to talk about today is just one way that we wanted to explore. There are a lot of ways. You may choose to share experiences that you've had yourself that relate to their experience, and what you did or what you found helpful, what you learnt about yourself, what you learnt about the situation, and what served you moving forwards. So that can also be a powerful technique. But let's talk about another way today. But what I've found is even more powerful is just to ask questions, and to ask empowering questions. So it's more like coaching than it is parenting in terms of my mindset.
And it's about, instead of having an agenda of how maybe you could help them change or do something differently, the intention is to support them to come to their own realizations and their own insights and their own shifts within themselves. So it's being that kind of, that companion and that guide along the journey of their own self-realization, rather than kind of the master that has the answers who will help them come to them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's about connecting them back with their own truth, with what's true for them, with where they want to go, with how this fits with their vision and their values. And you might not use those words, but that's where you're trying to go. You're trying to connect them to their own truth and their own way forward. So before we try and give you some examples of questions, which we got a bit stuck on because it's quite an intuitive process and obviously extremely context sensitive, But before we try and give you some more concrete examples to take out of this, there's a really important piece here, and this is something that you want to impart to your children, whether you do it through your energy or explicitly with your words. But you want to remind them that within them they do know, like you do know your own truth, and you are wise, and you do have answers, and those things that are kind of sitting there going, well, maybe that's the right way to do it. You want to bring those to the surface and remind them that their wisdom is within them, and to learn to really tap into that part of themselves.
So some examples of some questions. One of them is along the lines of, from this space you're in now, this aware space, if you went back to that situation, how might you do it differently? And another one is, what did you learn from that? Like, what did you learn from how you did that and what you know now to bring forwards when it comes up again?
And another possible question might be, now that you've had that experience, have you ever witnessed a person you admire have a similar experience to what you went through? And what did they do that you really admired? So all these questions are about tapping them back into their truth, what they felt as truth, what they've learned, how they think they should proceed, and helping them come back to really owning and claiming their path forwards.
And that's where change comes from. It comes from within, from our own self-awareness and our own initiative that comes from that insight into changing. It's not from any external information that gets put on top. So there's a lot of power in coaching our children in that way. So in recap, when there is more than just holding that space, holding that container needed, what we're suggesting is continue to hold the space, but hold the space for more exploration and more conversation and more drawing out to happen. And that's either through play, through holding the space and being an active participant in healing intuitive play that happens, that children are great at, or also having those deeper conversations where you are asking questions to bring that awareness and that shift out of your children. You're empowering them and inspiring them to change and to become aware of different dynamics. And there's many ways to do that, but the one way we shared today was by asking those empowering questions. So give any of that a go and let us know how it went.
That's a worry when we can't remember. What was the topic about?